City Council meeting of February 8, 2016. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Could we begin with the roll call?
Mayor Pro Tem Bliss.
Here.
Councilman Clark.
Present.
Councilman Corbett.
Present.
Councilman Gettings.
Here.
Councilwoman Scott. Here. Councilman Soltis.
Here.
Mayor Harwell.
Yes, I'm here. Would you please rise for the invocation, which will be given by Councilman Dave Soltis, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
We thank God for having given us the opportunity to meet together here today, and we ask most humbly for a blessing of our gathering. Brighten our eyes with greater understanding, enrich our hearts with compassion and courage, and again, receive our gratitude for this opportunity of fellowship. Amen.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Continuing on the agenda, we have presentations. We have one tonight, a proclamation for Random Acts of Kindness Week from February 14th to the 20th.
Yes, Your Honor. Whereas our daily news is dominated by tragic stories of crime, violence, and disaster, often leaving citizens with feelings of despair and helplessness. And whereas Random Acts of Kindness Week is enacted to encourage Madison Heights residents to commit conscious acts of goodwill toward one another as an affirmation of the goodness and generosity of the human spirit. And whereas by performing small acts of kindness during this week, we have an opportunity to recognize and celebrate the far-reaching effects we as individuals can have on the world around us. And whereas non-monetary kindness acts inspire and brighten the day of fellow citizens. And whereas the City of Madison Heights will be honored as City of the Week on local radio station CSX 94.7 in recognition of its celebration of Random Acts of Kindness Week. Now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council proclaim the week of February 14th through the 20th, 2016 as Random Acts of Kindness Week in Madison Heights and urge all citizens to join in celebrating the week with acts of kindness, patience, and understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Anything else? Just move on. Margene, did you have any comments or any comments from council?
No, but I just want to thank the city for, this is the 20th year we've done this. And it was inspired by an act of kindness that was done to my husband and myself. And so you can see that they are contagious. So if anyone does an act of kindness to you, it's sometimes frustrating because you can't thank that person. That's what happened in our case. So the idea then is to pass it on to somebody else, and you can do it. Doesn't have to be monetary. Just think of something that can brighten their day, and I know you'll be happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Soltis?
I think we got a random act of kindness here from Friends of Madison Heights area senior citizens, excuse me. Our Gloria right there, right? Handing them out to us, so appreciate that. To promote the welfare of senior citizens, raise the standards of life for senior citizens, to secure adequate laws for the care and protection of senior citizens, bring citizens into closer relations with family and community. So I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Okay, let's move on. Approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions tonight? Okay, we'll move on. Item A, the agenda, business licenses. We have 3 applicants for council's review. Number 1, Sunny Thai Restaurant. Number 2, Radio Shack. And number 3, Superior Medical Education. What is the wish of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Clark?
I'd make a motion to approve, under the conditions of the approval by all of the necessary departments. Number 1, Sunny Thai Restaurant, a food and beverage establishment. That is a change of ownership. Number 2, Radio Shack, an electronics store. That is a change of ownership. Number 3, Superior Medical Education, a paramedic school. This is a change of location.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor?
Mrs. Scott?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve under the conditions and all approvals from all necessary city departments, those 3 licenses as stated by Councilman Clark, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. They all passed. Congratulations. There are no business licenses, temporary, seasonal, or non-commercial. There are also no public hearings. Is there anything on tonight's agenda that someone in the audience would like to be brought forward at this time? Okay, we'll go to the meeting open to the public. If you'd like to address City Council, please approach the podium. It's your option, but please give us your name and address for the record. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Thank you.
My name's Gloria Moore. I live at 27368 Dartmouth. The Friends of the Madison Heights Area Senior Citizens is inviting everybody over to our third Tuesday meeting at 7 o'clock. It's over at Wilkinson. Beverages and snacks are on us. And also this coming Saturday, the church down the street at I-75 and Gardenia is going to be having a sing-along around what time, but anyway, they're going to have it in the evening. And I think, well, you have a good day.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Would anyone else like to address City Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gary McGilvery, 926 Tanglewood, and also your county commissioner. I just wanted to come and get the word out that the county is hiring people for summer help, and I know that's good for a lot of the kids, including high school kids that can work as people on our concession stand at the wave pool right here in Madison Heights, or lifeguards if they qualify. So just get the word out. You can go to oakgov.com and look up the jobs on there, or you can just give the Oakland County Parks Department a call, and they can direct you in the right direction. The second thing I wanted to mention is I was here once before and talked about trying to get some equity funding for cities for roads. And I'm happy to say that we're still working on it. I wish we had an answer already, but there's been some technical difficulties as to how we can do it. So, but we are still working on it, and I got a meeting scheduled next week. So hopefully I'll have an answer then.
Mr. McGilvery, could you give us in a nutshell what equity funding for city for roads means?
Well, right now we have what we call tri-party funding, which is where the city would put in a third, county would put in a third, and the road commission would put in a third for different road projects that you might have. So the problem is it's not, that's used a lot in the townships, but not so much in the villages and cities. So I asked that we try to get some kind of funding so it's more equitable for the cities to be able to do it. So what we're working on is it'll be a county only, not road commission, but just a county and city match. So it'd be a 50-50 match. But we have to be real delicate because of the way the state statute reads. So we're in the process of trying to get that done. So hopefully, like I say, I'll have an answer in a week or so.
Thank you.
And last, I wanted to just mention, every year I host spring cleanup at the Nature Center. I don't have a date yet, but we are going to do it. So as soon as I get a date, I will come back and let you know. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Would anyone else like to address City Council? The meeting's open to the public. Please come up, Mr. Grabowski.
Thank you very much, Mayor Harwell. I'm Chester Grabowski, resident at 26355 Wolverine Street. I've been going through these here papers, and yes, I was reading on this here security plan. It's right for this here meeting. This is really uncalled for. This is insulting. We got cameras around here that are scaring people. It's from speaking. This is going to insult, more people. Please, let's not do that. if you want to concentrate on public safety, we have a fire department there that's dangerously understaffed. We have a police department that officers tell me that they are understaffed, that they cannot enforce the city, ordinance. This is something that needs to be thought over again. Another thing I want to say is, again, I was reading on hopes and concerns. It's right for the year of 2016. I want to say thank you for people finally seeing to what I've been seeing is for the past 7 years. But if I can recommend, don't tell them the plans on cracking down on certain crimes. It would be a good idea, keep it a secret, execute it, then tell everybody about it, and at the same time, you can tell them the results of the plan.
That's a good point. Do you have
That would make things look a lot better, too.
any final thoughts? That's a good point, but thank you.
At this time, no. But thank you so much for listening to me.
You're welcome back. Thank you, Mr. Grabowski.
This time I'm here as a citizen, but I just want to register a complaint. We have newspaper advertising that's being delivered to the approach on my driveway. It's either every Friday and Saturday, one or the other, that they're doing this. They're doing it in the entire subdivision. We have a handbill ordinance, and we need to have them, our city enforce those. Because, I mean, it's just garbage laying out there for the most part, and they don't have any right to just throw it in your yard and keep going. If we have newspaper delivery and mail delivery, they take right to the house. So if they want to deliver that to the doorsteps, I guess I don't have a big problem with it, but it's just not right that they can just throw it out on your approach and your city strip someplace, and you have to go out there and pick it up. So I'd like to see something done about that.
Thank you.
It's the Free Press that's doing it, by the way, I think.
Would anyone else like to address City Council? The meeting is open to the public.
My name is Tom Smith. I live at 1166 East Kalama. I'm here about the article in the Madison Park News that discusses the underfunded liabilities owed by the city for the pension and post-employment health care for city employees and retirees. Full disclosure, I'm an accountant and I'm familiar with the issue. The article says that the current unfunded liability totals $104 million. It says the costs continue to grow due to a variety of factors, including revised mortality tables. What other factors are contributing to the increasing costs?
Do we want to answer that?
Well, Your Honor, that's going to be covered in the presentation we're going to give in just a few minutes. But I can tell you one of them is decreasing rate of return on investments as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's true. Also, escalating health care costs, too, at double and triple the rate of inflation on an annual basis. You're going to do a presentation. I can wait on the rest of my comments, but I do have some more comments.
Mr. Smith, it's up to you. The meeting's open to the public, so you have up to 3 minutes now. But I will, I'll bring it up. Tonight we will be discussing, there's a resolution to publish a notice to intent to proceed with the bond, and that'll generate another meeting in a month or so. So the public will have plenty of opportunities to address us specifically on this issue. But don't let me limit your time now.
Your Honor, just one quick question before we let Mr. Smith jump in. The item on the agenda, though, only pertains to pension bonds, not on OPEB. But even though OPEB is part of the big liability that we're dealing with, this agenda item only pertains to pension.
Thank you. The floor is yours, Mr. Smith.
Well, I'm really more interested in the OPEB bonds, actually. I looked at the actuarial reports, and I see that the pension systems are funded at 68% for the general employees and 71% for the police and fire. And that police and fire 2014 report, if you click on it, you get to the 2013 report, so you might want to take a look at that.
Thank you.
It's something I noticed. But the OPEB funding is at 25% for police and fire and 29% for the general employees. Now, what's causing major underfunding on that one? That's a whole lot different than the pension systems.
Do we have a quick answer, or do?
I mean, I'll answer it if you want.
Why don't we have him go ahead and answer in advance at the end?
There's only one thing I know of that causes that kind of underfunding, and that's not paying the full amount when the amount is due. You folks get an actuarial report every 2 years that tells you what the amount is supposed to be paid for. And if you're only getting 25% funding, you're not paying the full amount when it's told to you.
Your Honor, he's referring to the actuarial contribution, that there's not a requirement to fund that actuarial contribution as there is on the pension side. However, I will tell you that we've actually done, I think we've done remarkably well with our trust in funding our, yeah, right, we've done remarkably well in the last few years funding our trust compared to other cities. Setting up that trust was new as of 2007, right. So, yes, it is underfunded, but we're a lot better ahead than a lot of other cities in Michigan.
Well, I don't know if that really lets you off the hook for a 25% funded level. It causes several problems when you don't fund it fully when it's due.
Any final thoughts for the moment? I mean, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future to speak.
Well, if you don't fund it when it's due, what you wind up doing is pushing that obligation into the future, where now you're really reaching a situation where you're so far underfunded, you're looking at bonds to make up the issue. I don't know how many years this goes back, but it probably goes back 5, 10, 20 years or more. And essentially what you have is the current taxpayers are having to pick up the cost for what wasn't paid in full for people who received services many years ago. It's about like putting it on a credit card. And everybody knows what happens if you allow a credit card balance to get too big and too out of control. I'm sure we've all met someone who's had that problem. So I'm going to support the OPEB bonds and probably even the pension bonds, because I think it's important for the community to make good on its promises to its employees. Not funding these things puts their futures at risk, and that's not acceptable. So this needs to be dealt with. I'm glad to see that the city is looking at taking responsibility for this. I'm just saying that this is an issue that should have been dealt with many years ago, and the results of it are coming home to roost.
That's a good point. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thanks.
One more point. We have closed all of our health plans. I don't know if that gentleman's aware of that, but we haven't on the pension side for police and fire, but all of the health plans are in terms of retiree health, are closed to new hires. So we've tried to cut off the bleeding, if you will. So
That's part of the reason you're able to even issue OPEB bonds. That's one of the obligations. You have to close it to new people.
Yep, based on the statute. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Would anyone else like to address City Council? The meeting is open to the public.
Sorry about that. Hi.
Good evening.
My name is Frances Zick. I'm a resident of the city of Sterling Heights. I do run a community-based event in Madison Heights right over here at the UFCW Hall, 876, twice a year. My question is signage, temporary signage, and how does it work for the city of Madison Heights? I've had different answers given to me on that. Can anyone clarify that?
Well, we have current sign ordinances on the books. However, I believe the city's going through a process of review for those ordinances, and I think that's still at the Planning Commission level.
Yes,
Your
you're
Honor.
right.
So
But we do have certain rules regarding sign as it is now. I've got a 30-day number in the back of my head, but I don't remember what
Correct.
that's for.
I believe it's a 30-day window 4 times a year that you're allowed. But as the mayor alluded to, there was a recent Supreme Court decision, Reed versus Gilbert, that just came out that's going to change the whole landscape of temporary signage. It will not invalidate all of our ordinance, but it will force us to look, and everyone in the country basically, to look on a content-neutral basis to signage. So again, as the mayor said, Planning Commission's got that on their table to look for ordinance amendments to council very shortly. But I don't know if you've talked to community development, ma'am, but we'd certainly.
Not recently. I have run the event. This is the 4th event that we've run, so I want to put a sign out there. I'm not a resident, and I wouldn't want that to happen in my city. I don't want to just put a sign out there and just be illegal, but I definitely would want to do the right thing.
Mr. Mayor. Your Honor, could I just ask, when is the event going to run?
The event will take place in April, and then it will take place again in September. It's a kids' community event. It's kids' resale is what it is.
I recall it. Well, I'm sorry, cut off Mr. Sher. I was just, the timing is relevant. You'll probably be working under 2 different rules, one in September, one in April, but I'm sorry, Your Honor.
If you have a current question, then you should call our Community Development Department and speak to Jim Schaefer about it. And
Then he can answer all the signage.
And he can answer all those signage questions for you.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The meeting's open to the public. Would anyone else like to speak? Thank you. We'll continue on to communications. Number 1, a resignation from the Tax Board of Review.
Yes, Your Honor. A member of the Tax Board of Review, Lila Bickford, has verbally submitted her resignation from the board, and that's effective immediately. Staff and I recommend the council accept the resignation and declare the seat vacant.
Thank you, sir. What is the wish of City Council?
Your Honor.
Mr. Corbett?
Sir, I move that the council accept the resignation of Mrs. Bickford and issue the appropriate resolution of thanks. Declare the seat vacant also.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Scott?
second.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Okay, let's see. There was a motion from Councilman Corbett, supported by Councilwoman Scott, to accept the resignation of Ms. Bickford, to declare the seat vacant, and to issue a proclamation of thanks. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion is adopted. We'll move on. Communication number 2, a request for Civic Center Park fee waiver.
Yes, Your Honor. CareNet, a nonprofit pregnancy center in Berkeley, has requested the use of Civic Center Park and Pavilion C to hold their 2016 Walk for Life event on Saturday, May 7th from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Staff and I recommend approval of the event, subject to compliance with council's policy on uniform insurance requirements for special events, and the group has also requested a waiver of the pavilion rental and damage deposit fees.
Thank you. What's the wish of council?
Your Honor,
Mr. Bliss?
I move that we approve the Walk for Life event subject to the uniform insurance requirements for special events, as well as allow a waiver of the pavilion rental and damage deposit fees.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Gettings?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, motion by Mayor Pro Tem Bliss, supported by Councilman Gettings. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. We'll move on to communication 3 from the Lanphier Schools, a request for Civic Center Park fee waiver.
The Lanphier Schools has requested use of Civic Center Park to hold their Learning Ladder annual picnic on Thursday, June 9th from 5 to 9 p.m., including the use of pavilions B and C. Staff and I recommend approval of the event subject to council's policy on uniform insurance requirements for special events, and the group has requested a waiver of the pavilion and damage deposit fees.
What's the wish of City Council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Scott?
I move for council to comply with, I'm sorry, I'm mixed up here. The use of pavilions B and C for the Lanphier Schools park fee waivers on June 9th from 5 to 9 p.m. And that would be subject to the council's policy on uniform insurance requirements for special events. and also to give them a waiver of pavilion and damage deposit fees.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Clark?
second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion stated by Councilwoman Scott, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. We'll move on to reports. The first report tonight is from the city clerk, a resolution opposing the state prohibition of public information for local ballot questions.
In late December of last year, the Michigan legislature passed legislation effectively placing a gag order on local governments by prohibiting them within 60 days of an election from communicating factual information to the electorate regarding local ballot questions. The resolution before council opposes Public Act 269, and it also supports Senate Bill 703, House Bill 5221, and any similar legislation which would repeal the pertinent section of the newly enacted law. That's Section 57. The Michigan Municipal League, the Michigan Association of Counties, and the Michigan Townships Association all oppose Public Act 269 and support Senate Bill 703 and House Bill 5221. Staff and I recommend approval of the resolution.
What's the wish of council?
Your Honor.
Mr. Corbett?
Sir, I move that the council adopt the resolution as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Clark?
second.
Thank you. Is there discussion?
Your Honor,
Mayor Pro Tem Bliss?
just want to quickly discuss this particular resolution. We have two tonight that are very similar in nature. It's no secret that I typically oppose any type of resolution geared towards Lansing that's, we'll say, more state policy in nature centered, but this is, I think, an exception to it. And so I will happily support both of these resolutions because in both of these instances, the state stepped in and told us, and particularly our clerk's office, how they can and cannot operate, limiting some of their control. And as a big proponent of local control, I think that this is probably from a good place, but I think the execution of these bills was very flawed. And so I advocate, just like the rest of council may advocate, that they go back to the drawing board. You know, there's some good ideas here. For example, public spending in, you know, a clear, you know, I guess selling to the electorate. It's a bad thing. You know, it's horrible to have a public body spending taxpayer dollars to convince the taxpayers that they should or should not vote a certain way. But the way that this particular resolution, or the way that this bill was worded, limits our local government in such a way that it needs to be scrapped. Take the great idea that these two bills cover, one that prohibits spending towards information geared towards selling an electorate on a particular issue, as well as opening up absentee ballots for no reasons. Both are great ideas, they're great concepts, and I personally support both of them as concepts, but the bills are very flawed and they limit local control. And so we, as a council, particularly in this case, need to stand up and say, I disagree with the execution. So I am in favor of both of these resolutions.
You brought up a good point. Current law already forbids a public official from advocating.
Yes.
This new law passed at the end of 2015 prohibits any communication. And so, for example, the city of Novi, the city attorneys in Novi came to the opinion, well, if a member of the public comes to the podium and mentions a public issue, the city must black out the video for fear that the city is communicating on a ballot proposal. Even though it wasn't a public official stating it, it was a public official providing the television airwaves. But Mayor Pro Tem Bliss, you're in good company. As of last Friday, a federal judge in the U.S. District Court put a stop to the law based on the likelihood of success that a group of plaintiffs, municipalities, and schools will prevail on their argument that the new law is unconstitutional. So if we can do our part to join the tide of other communities and schools saying that this was bad law, I support it. Are there any further comments from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
Last Friday, I attended a Michigan Municipal League board meeting in Lansing. And after the meeting, we were talked to by an attorney from Miller Canfield who was already filing a temporary injunction with several plaintiffs because of the March 8th ballot questions that were coming up in several cities. Basically what happens is that Governor Snyder had signed the Republican-backed measure on January 6th after it was quickly approved the final night of the 2015 legislative selection with no substantial debate despite the addition of the divisive provision. So basically it was taken out of everybody's hands and just approved. And I'm glad you did talk about that judge. That was District Judge John Corbett O'Meara. And he has issued a preliminary injunction to stop the enforcement of the gag order. It was going to be very restrictive and was going to be interfering with the First and the 14th Amendments, the rights that we have, and they were going to be disallowed to even mention a ballot question, let alone any specifics about that item. So I know that we can't promote it, and we can't advocate it, but we can educate the public about what they are voting on. The Michigan Municipal League is encouraging cities all over Michigan, as well as other entities such as schools, and to go against that. And I think that they are succeeding. I think everybody is supporting that, and I do too.
Thank you. Any further comments? Any further discussion? Okay. We have a motion by Councilman Corbett, seconded by Councilman Clark, to adopt a resolution opposing the state prohibition of public information for local ballot questions. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion passes. We'll move on to report number 2 from the city clerk, a resolution opposing Senate Bill 639, an amendment to the Michigan election law.
Senate Bill 639, which has been introduced and referred to the State Committee on Elections and Government Reform, amends Michigan election law by placing unnecessary burdens on municipal clerk departments, disenfranchising new voters, and making it more difficult for citizens to register and exercise their right to vote. Staff and I recommend approval of this resolution opposing the legislation.
Thank you. What's the wish of council?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Clark?
I'd make a motion for resolution in opposition to Senate Bill 639, Amendment of Michigan Election Law.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Is there a second?
Your Honor.
Mr. Corbett?
Support.
Thank you. Is there discussion on this item? Okay, all in favor, let's see, a motion by Councilman Clark, supported by Councilman Corbett, to approve a resolution opposing Senate Bill 639. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion passes. We'll move on to report number 3 from the Deputy City Manager, a resolution authorizing the publication of a notice of intent to issue pension obligation bonds.
Yes, Your Honor. At this point, Deputy City Manager Marsh and I would like to give a short presentation to council on this agenda item.
Thank you.
Can everybody see that okay out in the audience? Yes? Okay. Mayor and council and members of the public, as part of the fiscal year 2016-2017 goal plan, council adopted the resource-related goal to develop and implement a plan and policy to fully address the city's unfunded liabilities for pension and other post-employment benefits, the term you've heard tonight, OPEB, or retiree health care. Tonight, we are presenting the option of pension obligation bonding to address a portion of this unfunded liability as it relates to pensions. The city currently funds 2 pension systems and only partially funds the 2 retiree health care trusts. The total unfunded obligation is currently calculated to be $104 million for all plans, of which $46.7 million is for pensions and $57.2 million is for retiree health care. The open or closed designation that you see on the chart here pertains to whether newly hired employees are eligible to join the plan. And this just highlights the yellow line highlights the MERS plan, which is what we're talking about this evening. The agenda before council tonight, the agenda item is to address a portion of this liability for the general employee's pension. This unfunded liability accounts for $15.7 million of the total $104 million. It is important to note that the plans related to the police and fire pension and retiree benefits are funded through the dedicated Act 345 tax millage. In researching options to achieve this goal, there are several items to be considered, including plan design and eligibility, actuarial assumptions, and funding methods. Over the past 3 rounds of negotiations, the city and unions have worked to address the liabilities for pension and retiree health care. Specifically, defined benefit pensions and retiree health care have been eliminated for employees hired into the city since 2005, with the exception of police and fire employees. Police and fire employees are the only employees where new hires are eligible for a tiered pension. During 2015, the assumptions used to calculate plan liabilities were updated to include a revised mortality table that factors in longer life expectancy and the reality of lower interest rates on investments.
As our contributions to these plans are expected to grow, funding from current year revenues becomes more and more difficult. As a result, we have researched the option of issuing pension obligation bonds. Pension obligation bonds are bonds issued by a state or local government to pay its obligation to the pension fund or system in which its employees are members. This bond liability would replace a majority of the pension liability. It is therefore not a new liability such as issuing debt to buy or build something new, but instead works much like a home equity loan being rolled into a mortgage. The pension obligation bonds are structured differently than in other states. In 2012, the state of Michigan passed a public act giving municipalities the right to issue these bonds only if certain conditions are met, such as that the plans are closed to new hires, the entity has a high credit rating of at least AA, and the entity files a comprehensive financial plan with the state. A number of communities, including West Bloomfield, Shelby Township, and Oakland County, just to name a few, have issued these types of bonds. All issues also have to be pre-approved by the state of Michigan. Madison Heights meets all of the state's criteria. As mentioned previously, we recommend that council consider issuing bonds for the general pension unfunded liability only. This is because our police and fire plans are not close to new hires. Based upon the financial analysis, issuing pension obligation bonds for this portion for the general employees could produce a savings to the city of approximately $4 million over the next 16 years. Also, bonding for retiree health care, or OPEB, is a riskier proposition. Retiree health care has many moving parts, such as volatility of health care cost, continued advancement in medical technology, the future of health care in America as a whole, and discussions at the state level of a future retiree health care pool on behalf of local units of government. Specifically, the unfunded pension liability for general employees is $15.7 million as of the last valuation date, December 31st, 2014. Consideration is being requested for 95% of this liability, or $14.9 million plus issuance cost. The request is being made only for 95% of the total in order to guard against overfunding the plan in the case of higher investment earnings than are actuarially assumed. If actuarial requirements are met, this will require an additional pension contribution being needed. So what are the benefits of these pension OPEB bonds? Pension OPEB bonds can produce significant savings. The city estimates a savings of approximately $4 million over the next 16 years based on actual investment interest rates earned. Bond proceeds are invested immediately in the pension trust, which is managed by the Municipal Employees Retirement System, or MERS. This pension system assumes a rate of earnings projected each year. For the general employee's pension, this interest rate is assumed to be 7.75. Taxable bond rates are currently roughly 3.7 to 4.2% less, or 3.7 to 4.2% for less than a 30-year debt. Including the cost of issuing bonds and the possible interest rate increase for these bonds being issued, we would need to exceed a 5.2% over the next 16 years in order to make this a feasible option. Relief will be provided to the budget through a constant bond payment that is still volatile that the required pension contributions for the term of the bond. Based on the investment returns, it is possible that the city will still have to make pension contributions in addition to the bond payment, depending on the funding status. Despite the city making its actuarially required contributions, the funding level is now only 64% for general employees. By funding this liability, employees and their unions should be able to rest assured that the benefits the city has promised can be provided. So what are the risks? There are several risks that can occur from the issuance of these bonds, with the major concern being interest rate risk. While unlikely, it is possible that averaged over the 16-year period, the actual interest rate on investments will drop below the bond interest rate, or that 5.2% we discussed, resulting in the pension funding having negative earnings. The final amount of interest rate savings cannot be determined with absolute certainty. If the pension fund enjoys higher than expected earnings, the pension fund may become overfunded. Bond proceeds will be invested in a lump sum amount that otherwise would have been paid and invested in increments over the period of years. This concentrates rather than spreads out the market timing risk. Now Ben will cover the timing of this process and conclude the presentation.
Timing is important in the decision to move forward with issuing pension obligation bonds. If council decides to move forward with the bond issuance, a resolution would need to be approved tonight authorizing the newspaper publication of a notice of intent to issue the bonds. In March, council would be asked to approve the bond resolution, including a not-to-exceed amount. This approval timeline or time frame will allow for the bonds to be sold in May or June of this year. Voter approval would not be required, as the bond issue would be conducted pursuant to Michigan Public Act 329. However, the bond issue time frame does include a 45-day voter referendum following publication of the notice of intent. And if council has any questions about the legality of the process and the steps, Mr. Jeff Aronoff is here from Miller Canfield tonight, our bond counsel. So in conclusion, although our options are limited, staff will continue to search for ways to reduce the remainder of the unfunded liability as we remain on a pay-as-you-go basis for annual contributions. Adjustment of the police and fire pension millage, which currently stands at 5.8612 mils, may be necessary in the future in order to adequately fund increased liability. Unfortunately, this millage may not be used to fund a lower cost defined contribution plan. So that concludes the presentation, Your Honor and Council.
Thank you for the report. What's the wish of City Council?
Your Honor,
Mr. Corbett?
I want to, one moment, sir. I just want to grab the...
Thank you. Take your time.
Yep. I would move that the council approve the publication of the intent to issue pension obligation bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $15,250,000, which will represent the first step in the city's efforts to address the pension unfunded liability.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Gettings?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gettings. Is there discussion on the motion?
Yes, there is, Your Honor.
Mr. Corbett.
One quick question, if I could engage Melissa
Please.
for a moment. I'd like you to just talk about, if you could, the implementation of the revised actuarial report a couple years ago. I think that's intriguing, the differences between 40 years or over the 34 years, whatever the period of time was.
You mean the changes that we recently made
That's
in
the one.
actuarial
Yes, ma'am.
assumptions? There were several changes that were put into place. The most significant was the mortality table, which in plain English is the life expectancy of people. They're living longer than they were 20 years ago. And so we recently went to a 2014 mortality table, and that had a huge impact. We also dropped the assumed interest rate. It was dropped from 8% to 7.75, and we have closed all of our plans, so we are moving forward at a lower amortization period. So again, in plain English, what that means, it's like if you have a 30-year mortgage and you refinance to a 15, your payment's going to go up, but you're paying in a shorter amount of time. So our payment years are now shrunk to 16, and they used to be constantly at 30.
And the previous mortality table, when was that dated from?
I want to say 1971, and it was rolled forward to 1984, I think, just off of the top of my head. So about 20 years.
Yeah. So let me just make just so the point isn't lost, Your Honor. We had actuarials, we had financial advisors, and yes, we had accountants who reviewed this paperwork for 40 years, Your Honor, and it never occurred to anybody that the mortality table needed to be revised over that period of time. A small but significant fact that apparently everybody up and down that line missed, and that has had a significant impact both in terms of our current debt, but also retrospectively looking at the debt that we had accumulated over whatever the preceding period of years were. So that whatever decisions we may have made over the past few years, it certainly got a significant kick when somebody woke up to the fact that people are living longer.
Well, the Society of Actuaries actually put together this study, and I don't know.
Oh, but there were a lot of people, Melissa, who saw that and
Oh, I'm
missed
sure.
that.
But it takes a long time to do the study. So this studies, I'm just saying they don't come out every year.
I understand.
Your Honor, just to quantify what the Councilman Corbett was saying, the annual impact of that study change is going to be roughly $850,000 going forward between the
current year,
between the two plans, between MERS and police and fire, and that's an annual figure, Your Honor.
In the current year, yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Myers, could you reiterate or restate and re-explain the $4 million of possible savings from if we did nothing and just proceeded status quo to how we may be able to realize $4 million of savings over the next 16 years?
With Council's permission, Your Honor, I'd like to show you. There's a table that speaks to that. Your Honor and Counsel, this table was provided by our underwriter, and it basically shows the purple line at the top that has the steadily increasing trend is our estimated annual required contribution going forward at the 7.75 assumed interest rate. The middle line, which is roughly flat, is our estimated bond principal and interest. So one of the benefits of bonding is to eliminate the volatility for budget purposes and to know and to be able to plan for your amount going forward. And this is over the 16-year life of the bonds. That smaller line, which is light gray, actually shows the savings. So that's mainly the difference between the two. So that cumulative savings over the life of the bonds is what yields an estimated $4 million in savings.
Thank you. And that's dependent on the market. That depends on how those funds are invested.
Yes, Your Honor, it's certainly a factor.
What's the history with our investments, with where this money's going?
Yes.
I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I do know that MERS thinks that they can meet that 7.75% over the long term. So you can't look at 1 year at a time. This past year, they did not meet the 7.75, but probably 2 years ago, they were at 11%. So you have to average it out over the 16 years, and they are very confident that they can meet that 7.75, which would provide savings to the city because we only have to earn 5.2 to basically break even.
Okay, oh, that's a good point. Okay, so there are potential savings just based on how that money is invested. I'm also interested on the other side, our costs for doing this. And the City Council held a special meeting January 18th, a public meeting. Members of the public and the press were there. And I looked at the fees, and it looked like the underwriting fee was going to charge about 1%. That was the stated fee then, but the report tonight says the fee is actually a little bit less, 0.7 of 1%. What's happened in the 3-4 weeks that the underwriting fee is less? Do we know that?
Well,
I mean,
the
it's not
main thing
bad,
that I know is that we have a smaller amount. When we were originally talking about this, we were talking about 100%, and so the fees were calculated on 100%, and now we're only talking about issuing 95%.
And Your Honor, for the public's benefit, I don't think we fully went into the reasons, but we decided to recommend 95% as a hedge against overfunding, which is also something we don't want to be able to do.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I see that the bond will be less. So 3 weeks ago, we were computing the numbers at 15.985 million, today 15.125. But still, the percent of the fee is reduced. I'm assuming the bank
I'm not
is charging
exactly
this
sure,
fee,
but typically, and Jeff may know more about this than me, but typically there is a scale based on the dollar amount.
Oh, okay.
And so
Okay.
I'm assuming that's what it is.
I understand. Okay. And legal fees, or the cost of issuance, is not based on a percentage, but it's somewhat of a flat rate, just an a la carte, I guess. I mean, it doesn't matter the size of the bond, but the legal fees were estimated at $125,000 3 weeks ago. Now they're estimated about $101,000. This is under the cost of issuance. I'm just curious about that cost.
I am going to defer that one to Jeff because he's from Miller Canfield, who is our legal counsel on issuing these bonds.
Sure. Your Honor, I'm not sure exactly what itemization you're looking at, but so there should be two classes of cost of issuance. The underwriter's fee, which is the sort of markdown that they take and put in their pocket for selling the bonds, and then the other cost of issuance would be inclusive of the bond counsel fee, but not only bond counsel fee, also the financial advisor fee. For a bond issue of this size, there is a prospectus, which we call an official statement, which is drafted. That's a disclosure document that is provided to investors. There's the cost of producing and printing that, and then various filing fees, including the notice of intent filing and others.
Thank you. And I think council was advised that there's some sort of a fee watchdog, some independent third party that kind of keeps an eye on these fees. Was it Umbaugh and Associates?
Yes,
Can you explain their role in all of this?
Tom Traciak from Umbaugh.
And what duties is he charged with?
Again, Jeff probably...
Yeah, well, Tom Traciak would be the financial advisor. His job, remember, the underwriter, they don't, while they work with the city, they don't work for the city. They are the purchaser of the bonds, and then they turn around and sell them to Wall Street, right, to the secondary market. But they'll do a financial analysis, but they don't do it on behalf of the city. The financial advisor, which would be Tom Traciak, is doing a financial analysis on behalf of the city in the same way that bond counsel's client is the city, the financial advisor's client is the city as well, and that would be Tom Traciak's role. And
why is it important that we use a relatively large bank like Fifth Third and not just any other bank, a smaller bank or a bigger bank? Why is Fifth Third a good partner here?
Well, and I know Lou Orcutt, I believe, is the Fifth Third representative here, and he'd probably give you a great pitch. But understand that Fifth Third is not like a local bank that's purchasing the bonds for their own investment. In this case, as with most bond issues of this size, you have an institution that is acting as an underwriter. So they initially purchase the bonds, but then they have the capacity and the network to sell them on the secondary market, which increases the marketability, lowers the interest rate that the city has to pay. Local banks wouldn't act as underwriters. You sometimes have local banks that are essentially providing just a loan to their client, the city, the township, the county, and it gets wrapped up in a bond. But it doesn't behave on the market the same way that a bond really does, where you have a full secondary exchange, which makes the bonds much more liquid. It's not anything you interface with, right? Once you have sold the bonds to the underwriter, they're off. But the pricing that you get, meaning the interest rate that the city has to pay, is affected by the underwriter's network and its ability to secondarily trade them on the open market, makes it more liquid and lowers the interest rate for the city.
Great, thank you. That's really informative. Any other comments or questions from council? It's open for discussion to council.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Soltis?
So one of the key elements, if I'm hearing it correctly, and we did, just to let the public know that we did have a meeting with all the stakeholders regarding this. It's a complex issue, but we try to hash it out, and we asked plenty of questions to everybody there. And I appreciate everybody's work on this, from city manager and Melissa. But the key, from what I understand, is to lock in that best interest rate. Is that correct? Sure. And that's where we're going to make our most profitable option. And then that's what we're looking at. And then in that sense, time is kind of the essence as well, correct? I mean, because you don't know exactly what the market's going to do, but it has been trending in our favor. So we're looking at that timeline that city manager mentioned. I think it was July. Is that
May, June for
May, June is the target date. That's great. Okay, thank you.
Good point. Any further discussion from City Council? Okay, let's continue. There was a motion made by Councilman Corbett and seconded by Councilman Gettings to approve the publication of a notice of intent to issue pension obligation bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $15,250,000 as the first step of the process to reduce the city's general pension unfunded liability. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion passes. Thank you. Continuing on tonight, let's see. There are no items for future public hearing, but we do have an item under bid awards and purchases. Item F1, telephone system and Ethernet network equipment. Mr. Myers?
Yes, Your Honor. As reported by our IT provider, the city's current telephone system and related networking equipment have reached the end of their useful life. Technology staff recommends replacing it with a new system using Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP technology. This upgrade includes handsets, Ethernet switching equipment, monitoring software, a call management system, and firewall, all of which will stabilize our voice and data networks. On November 6, 2015, the city issued a request for proposals through the Mitten Cooperative Purchasing System. A total of 76 vendors downloaded the request for proposals, and a mandatory pre-bid walkthrough was held on November 12th, at which time 20 vendors attended. Our IT provider and staff conducted an in-depth review of the 8 proposals that were received, utilizing weighted scoring across 10 project components, which include price, equipment quality, call reporting, installation and project management, office proximity, training, telephone expandability, redundancy and disaster recovery, understanding of the system requirements, and references. The top 3 scoring firms were invited to interview with our IT provider, which is BPI. NetTech Corporation, which placed at the top in the weighted scoring of proposals, also finished first in the interview process. Staff and I recommended award of this purchase to the lowest responsible bidder, NetTech Corporation, for unit cost in an amount not to exceed $201,523, which reflects a $10,000 deduction as our IT provider will be installing the handsets. Both the request for proposals and the bid recommendation have been reviewed and approved by the Information Technology Advisory Committee, or ITAC.
Thanks, Mr. Myers. What's the wish of City Council?
Your Honor,
Mayor Pro Tem Bliss.
I move that we award the purchase to the lowest responsible bidder, NetTech Corporation, subject to an amount not to exceed $194,500 based upon the budgeted amount plus reimbursements expected from Oakland County.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Scott.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion on this item?
Your Honor.
Mr. Bliss.
So for the public's perspective, I kind of want to go through what this process has been. I know James Blackburn is here, who's the manager of our technology department. I'd love for him to talk a little bit about the weighted scoring that City Manager Myers mentioned. But this bid was vetted from the beginning concept. It actually went to ITAC in its raw form. There was about an hour-and-a-half ITAC meeting where each member of ITAC discussed it and vetted it prior to it even becoming an RFP. Then when it came back and the recommendation to go with NetTech came to ITAC, additional discussion warranted the two changes that were reflected in my motion from the initial staff change. Number one, it is going to be contingent on some reimbursements from Oakland County. That was brought up in the ITAC discussion that about 4,500, if I'm not mistaken, of this project was actually geared towards the Nature Center. And so since it's a part of the Nature Center per our agreement, that is actually going to be covered by Oakland County through budgetary means. Secondly, it was noted in that discussion with ITAC that the handsets that we were discussing may not be necessary in their specs. They were 4-line handsets, and swapping to a 2-line handset or even reviewing a couple pieces of the equipment would net us a savings that would bring it back under our budgeted amount. And so it was a great process to where we got the best vendor per the weighted scoring. And again, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the weighted scoring for the public's sake. But we had the best vendor through weighted scoring, excellent equipment, and it's coming in under budget. So in my opinion, great job by all. And I'd actually like to, City Manager Myers, if you could tell estimated when this phone system was installed?
The one that we currently
The one that we currently have.
Oh, boy.
That's a long time.
A long time. I'd have to, Your Honor, I think I'd have to measure it in decades. I'm going to say maybe 20 years. At least.
It has
I'm guessing.
It has by far outlived its life. And what the new system is going to give is a single piece of public safety that I think is incredibly important. Right now, there is no way to tell where in what city building somebody is calling 911. This new system is going to enable us to pinpoint that. So it's not just a technology upgrade, that there is a public safety component, there's some disaster recovery. I mean, we've got backups. I mean, this is taking us to a system that's worthy of the residents that we serve. And it was done above board at multiple public meetings, vetted, discussed by the ITAC board as well as staff so thoroughly that I am absolutely proud to have made the motion, and I'm excited to see it roll out.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further discussion from City Council?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Soltis?
I just want to note that I believe in the process. I think it's a wonderful thing. There was a gentleman, one of the bidders, that had some questions on the bidding process, and I assume he's not here, and that's, I just want to make note that's unfortunate. could answer some of his questions.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Your Honor,
Mr. Bliss?
would it be possible for Mr. Blackburn to come up and discuss a little bit of that weighted scoring and why this vendor was chosen?
That's useful. Yes, please.
Mayor, City Council, thanks for inviting me up to tell you a little bit about what I've been up to for the last 6 months on this project. City Manager and Councilman Bliss did a very good job describing most of that project. We started with determining that the phone system was inadequate and did come to its end of useful life. And the current network system that was in or is in place now wouldn't support a modern phone system. So we had to start from scratch to really build up the network and the phone system. So that in mind, we started by interviewing each of the department heads to find out what their requirements were for the new phone system and being key stakeholders in this project. Then what we did was we created a survey where the department heads could go online and fill out a simple form so we could get some of the counts of the phones and the features that they would be interested in a new system. Then we took all of that information and constructed about a 50-page request for proposal. And that's when we went to ITAC to have it reviewed and get their input about what technologies they felt would be appropriate for the city. After that review process, then we went out for a formal bid and had a bidders meeting, received formal questions from those bidders, posted the answers to those questions, and then received 8 qualified bids from that process. From those 8 qualified bids, we then reviewed them on a weighted scoring system. There was 10 specific items that we wanted to see and qualify each vendor. This was noted in detail in the request for proposal, so each of the respondents would know how they would be scored on their response to the request for proposal. From that scoring system, we took the 3 highest scoring vendors and invited them in for an in-depth interview here at the city. Each of those interviews lasted approximately 3 hours long, and we had about 6 pages of questions to go through and verify all the details of each of their proposals. That verified our scoring system, and from that we determined that NetTech was the highest scoring vendor and they met all the requirements as requested. We then took those results to ITAC and reviewed it with them, which then they verified the technology that was being recommended and the process of installing it and making sure that it was functionally correct. Now, going forward, we're viewing this not only as the purchase of this technology, but we're viewing it as the purchase of the technology as the first implementation phase or project management. And then after that's complete, going into a maintenance phase, which is forecasted to be 5 to 8 years. So we're forecasting the life of this equipment will be a minimum of 5 years. At 8 years, probably reaching a point where it needs to be refreshed or replaced. So looking at it from a long-range perspective. So that brings us to here today, and I open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. Any questions or any further discussion from City Council? Hearing none, let's call the vote. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Bliss, seconded by Councilwoman Scott, to award the purchase to the lowest responsible bidder, NetTech Corporation, subject to an amount not to exceed $194,500 based upon the budgeted amount plus reimbursements expected from Oakland County. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. Let's see. We'll continue on the agenda. There are no ordinances nor unfinished business tonight. So let's see, could I please have a motion to adopt the minutes from the special city council meeting of January 18, 2016?
Your Honor.
Mr. Corbett?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Clark?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular council meeting of January 25, 2016 as printed?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Clark?
I make a motion to adopt the meeting of January 25th and adopt it as printed.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor?
Mrs. Scott?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion passes. We'll move on to appointments tonight. Let's see. We have some current commissioners who are willing to renew, and we also have some new applicants to fill vacancies. So what's the wish of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please, Ms. Scott.
I would like to make a motion for the Historical Commission, 3-year terms, to reappoint Justin Suarez for a term to expire 2/28/2019, for Andrew McGilvery to be reappointed for a 3-year term to expire on 2/28/2019. And we had a new applicant. Her name is Chelsea Zuzindlak, and I would like to appoint her to fill the vacant term that is expiring on February 28th, 2017.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Clark?
Second.
Is there discussion? Let's see. Motion is to appoint Justin Suarez, Andrew McGilvery, and Chelsea Zuzindlak to a 3-year term to the Historical Commission to expire February 28th, 2019. All in favor, please say aye.
Mr. Mayor.
Aye.
The third one was 2017.
17, yeah.
Okay, I correct that. Thank you. Any further questions? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Congratulations, they're appointed. Any further appointments?
Your Honor,
Mr. Bliss?
I move that we reappoint Andrew McGilvery and Stanley Richard to the Information Technology Advisory Committee, a 3-year term that would expire February 10th of 2019.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Clark?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? He said both of them. Okay. All in favor of appointing Andrew McGilvery and Stanley Richard to the ITAC for a 3-year term to expire February 10, 2019, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Congratulations, they're appointed. Any other nominations tonight?
I believe we have one on the zoning board, Mr. Mayor.
Please, Mr. Clark.
Jason Bauer for alternate term expired 2/1/16, and he's willing to serve again for a 3-year term, which would expire in 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Is there a second?
Your Honor.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Corbett?
Support, sir.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of appointing Jason Bauer to the alternate number 2 position on the ZBA for a 3-year term to expire February 1, 2019, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Congratulations, he's appointed. We also have applicants to the CDBG Review Committee and the Construction Board of Appeals. Does council have those names right now? Rick Lewis to CDGB and Mr. Felzahn and Mr. Lewis to the Construction Board of Appeals.
Your
Do you
Honor.
have those names? Mr. Corbett?
I'd be happy to carry those nominations forward, sir, as
Okay.
read.
Can we do
There's
them all at
support.
once, or should we separate them?
If there's a request to separate them, you should. Otherwise, you could take them together as long as you specify.
Okay, there's a motion to appoint Rick Lewis to the CDBG Review Committee for a 3-year term Same motion is also appointing Rick Lewis and Douglas Falzon to the Construction Board of Appeals to 2-year terms. Is there a second to this motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Mrs. Scott?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, I'll restate it just one more time. A motion by Councilman Corbett, seconded by Councilwoman Scott, to appoint Rick Lewis to the Community Development Block Grant Review Committee for a 3-year term.
And then, Your Honor, that would expire November 1st, 2018.
Okay, it happens to expire November 1, 18. Same motion to appoint Rick Lewis to the Construction Board of Appeals to a 2-year term to expire 12/31/17. And also appoint Douglas Falzon to the Construction Board of Appeals to expire 12/31/17. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. It passes. Congratulations, they're appointed. I don't see any other applicants. Are there any other nominations I've missed? Okay. That's it. Okay, so before we adjourn, I'd ask if there are any closing comments from council, and I'd like to begin with Councilman Corbett.
Just a couple quick items. Just congratulations again to Mrs. Scott, another 20 years of the Random's Acts of Kindness. And I think it was only 1 year old. No, it was a little more than that, 3, 4 years old when I got here, I think, that you've been doing that. But congratulations again for keeping it going. And just a reminder that we do have office hours at the library. We had a special guest appearance by the mayor briefly on Friday, but 1 to 3, and anytime if you have any concerns, questions, complaints we'll reserve for the mayor. Compliments I'll take. And of course, if that's not a good time and you're interested in talking to anyone on council, just give the manager's office a call and I'm sure they'll arrange it. That's all tonight, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Mayor Pro Tem Bliss.
Yes, Your Honor. First, I want to once again thank the ITAC committee as well as staff for their due diligence in this process with the bid. And we're talking about a major overhaul of a critical, an absolutely critical piece of networking and hardware that frankly is pivotal to all of our residents. You know, just the ability for somebody to come in or to call in and have somebody answer the phone and to have that high of quality is important. And we're leveraging such an old system. It's nice to see systematically upgrading each and every key technology component. And now the third consecutive time that this has been reviewed by ITAC, it has come in at or below budget every single time. And that's a astounding thing, and it's a credit to both the ITAC committee as well as our staff and how well they're working together and coming up not just with at or below budget, but a high level of detail to what the specific needs of the city are. That has led to better equipment that serves a stated and defined purpose. And so I tip my hat to everybody involved. It was a great process, and it's nice. It's going to be nice to see the end result, just like we saw with the TV productions equipment and all these great cameras and our ability now to live stream and put these videos immediately on YouTube. I think our phone system upgrade is going to serve the public in the same way, and I'm just really proud of everybody involved. Second, I want to highlight an upcoming program that I'm very excited about, our student internship program that we're going to be unveiling this year is near done. The schools have been contacted. All 3 school districts are excited to participate. So we will have student applicants from all 3 of the school districts in our city. And for those who haven't heard me talk about it before, we're going to do an internship where local high school students, they have to live in the city of Madison Heights and attend school in the city of Madison Heights. They're going to have the ability to shadow members of staff and council and actually participate and run a mock council meeting. So we're taking the idea from actually a program that I participated in a long time ago, run by the JCs, and we're expanding on it, and we're giving our students the ability to engage in local government, and hopefully, when we fast forward some years down the line, they'll be sitting in a few of these chairs. So it's going to be a really cool program. Hats off to staff for putting the details together, for working with the school districts, and there will be a formal announcement coming here in the next couple of weeks. We should have up on our website as well as on the cable channel for anybody who's interested in participating. There's just going to be a short essay for any students that are watching. I say that kind of laughing, right? There are probably not too many students watching right now, but hopefully the students that do engage in this process and understand its relevance and the relevance of city government to their lives, they'll be watching future meetings. Finally, the last item I have, and I wrote these notes during the meeting, but we're talking a lot about the two resolutions that we passed to the state of Michigan. And I just wanted to highlight a point that I think needs to be said. Ideas are extremely important. But when you have the best idea in the world, it doesn't matter if execution falls short. And I've personally reached out to representatives in Lansing about this issue as me as a person, and I've advocated to them to run this process similarly to how we vet things on the local level. That type of execution can only be achieved through transparency and a vetting process that allows citizens to comment, as well as giving a detailed discussion by the elected officials involved. In both of those bills, that process was not done. In both of those bills, they jumped to the end and said, I have a great idea, I'm sure it'll be wonderful. You can't govern that way. And so I want to commend, my peers up here, our staff, and our general public. I think we had the longest meeting open to the public that I have seen in at least a year of people coming up and voicing their concerns. And so hats off to everybody involved in making this city better because of those comments, because of the dialogue, because execution is as important as the ideas that we discuss. So thank you.
Thank you. Really good points. Mr. Gettings, anything tonight?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sherman?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
Just that I would ask Councilwoman Scott to reserve a spot in the Heritage Room for one of our phone sets. I'm looking forward to displaying it.
That would be awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all you.
Thank you. Mrs. Prince?
Yes. Applications for absentee ballots for the March 8th presidential primary election are available through the city clerk's office. You can call our office and we can send you an application, 248-583-0826, or come in and get an application. I just want to remind you that this is a closed presidential primary, and in order to get a ballot for this election, you will have to declare what party you would like your ballot for, either a Democratic or Republican. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Oh, just one thing, Mr. Mayor. The gentleman that got up to speak earlier, did you get all the information you needed?
Most of it.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Clark?
That's all.
Mrs. Scott, anything tonight?
Yes, I would like to make special recognition of two of our firefighters that both retired recently after 25 years each of service. The first one is Dan Garvey, who was our lieutenant since 2011. He was issued a proclamation, but I'd just like to highlight some of his accomplishments. He was Firefighter of the Year in 1997. He received Meritorious Service Awards in 1997 and 2000, and was a recipient of the City Council Life-Saving Award in 2000, and numerous letters of accolade, plus being a good guy to really work with. And the second one is Timothy Kennedy, who retired again after 25 years. He was founded the department's honor guard. He was the firefighter of the year in 1994, 2000, and 2002. Was the recipient of 15 meritorious service awards and received a unit citation in 2005 for the Madison Heights apartment fire. And one thing I would like to interject that was not mentioned on here was that Tim kept a history of the fire department for, well, he would have been 25 years, but he went back before that. So literally, he has a huge amount of collections of albums that probably reach this high of all the history of the fire department. He was clippings, photos, everything, commendations. And we really owe a lot to Tim because he did that on his spare time. But without those, we would not have the vital history that he has recorded for us. So I really want to thank Tim for doing that.
Margene, I know your sentiments also include fire retiree Michael Hogue, who also retired after a 20-year plus career.
Yes. Now, I don't have his proclamation here, but I'll get a hold of it and read it at the next meeting.
Sorry to interrupt you. Please continue.
That's all right. No, I know Mike should be mentioned as well. I would also like to remember that, to tell everybody that the Heritage Rooms will be open again on Tuesday, every Tuesday, between 3 and 7. So if you'd like to see our new collection for the Heritage Rooms and the history of our city, you're welcome. We always have free admission. Bring the kids. We're open between 3 and 7. If it's after hours, after 4:30, you'll enter in the elevator on the north side of our building that faces the police department and just take it down to the lower level and follow the signs. Martha Kehoe and Rita Decker will be there tomorrow to introduce you to anything that you wish to look at or give any information that you want to see. And last but not least, I would like to make sure that everybody is aware that this weekend on Saturday, the Memorial Day Parade fundraiser will be held, and it's the city 1950 sock hop, which had one before, and I remember it was a lot of fun. So wear your shoes, but you can take them off at the door. The date is Saturday, February 13th. The place will be the Madison Place Hall, which is 876 Horace Brown Drive. It only costs $10 to get in, and it will be held between 6 and 11:30 p.m. So please come by and reminisce about the 50s and have a great time. Plus, support our Memorial Day Parade. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Mr. Soltis?
Thank you, Your Honor. Also to echo or add to the city clerk that it's a closed ballot. You have to pick which party you're affiliated with.
Spent a lot of time last week being
you only keep, I'm sorry? No. You only keep it for 6 months, that information, correct? 6 months or 8 months?
Actually, I checked with the state, and it's destroyed after 22 months, but it's only open to political parties.
Oh, okay. Well, then scratch that. I thought maybe they'd inhibit someone from declaring, but nonetheless. I want to thank Councilman Bliss again and ITEC for a job well done, another victory. I appreciate all the work. I also greatly appreciate the citizens coming out and to these meetings and vocalizing your opinions. I think it's invaluable. The more, the better. So I greatly appreciate everyone here. Also, I'm glad to see that the high schoolers, that they're going to have a internship. I think it's it's going to be highly enlightening to them. I did an internship for my graduate degree here in Madison Heights. And I remember when I emailed Ben, and he's like, why? I said, I was really appreciative that he did give that a chance, because I don't think they ever did that before. So it was 6 months, but I learned a lot. I went to every department, and I assume these kids will too, and so they'll be happy they did it, as I did. Also, this flyer we just got, I'm not quite sure, but it's a gospel benefit singing Saturday. This Saturday, it's starting at 6 p.m. at New Beginning Baptist Church in Gardenia, 950 West Gardenia, Madison Heights. So somebody put it out, I might as well announce it to people. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Soltis. I also want to thank the members of the public who joined us tonight. and those who watch from home. The comments I receive throughout the weeks and the council receives through emails and voicemail and one-on-one calls really help to inform our decisions and complement the staff reports we get. But just a reminder, us elected officials are lay people, and we speak for the residents. So input is always very important and needed for this process. I want to thank Street Supervisor Corey Elmas and Director of Public Services Joe Vitale Jr. for responding to a citizen concern this week about a garbage truck that dropped some hydraulic fluid or oil in the street, and our city employees were there to respond to the citizen's needs, get it cleaned up, and when the citizen had a call back for a second cleaning, they came right back and did it even better. So thank you to our DPS for really responding quickly and efficiently. I also want to thank Police Officer Ed Malik for inviting me to ride along on his day shift patrol. And I got to spend a couple hours with the officer, see, a day in the life of a police officer. And I invite anyone in the public or city council to sign up to do a ride along with our police officer. It's so eye-opening to see what they go through. Our police department, they log something like 20,000 incidents a year. I mean, it's an unfathomable amount of incidents. And the handful of incidents I witnessed all had to do with mental health. And it just really shocked me. That may be atypical, I don't know, but the day I was there, it was mental health after mental health case. And I think we need to consult with our police officers and police chief just to see if there's any special training that our officers could acquire just to deal with mental health issues. That was really interesting to note. Also, did you want to remind council and the public that Hiller Elementary is having their Leadership Day this Wednesday. So if you haven't signed up, it's 12:30 p.m. at Hiller Elementary. With that, no further comments from council. We'll adjourn this meeting, and I will see you in 2 weeks for the next regular council meeting. Thank you.
And then you go to do it at the end.